Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Season 1, Episode 6 of Heels. So, really, for this episode, I would just say it's kind of a kind of episode. Like, to me, there's just, this whole episode is to really just be about, apologizing to people, whoever anybody has done wrong, or, probably the best part about this episode is figuring out that we do have seemingly a moment where Apocalypse is to give us some kind of backstory further into that character to let us get to see this character from outside of the ring. And I thought that was really interesting, and also I was like, holy crap, the the thing that Apocalypse needed to say within the scene of which that he is in, doing some I think some kind of AA meeting, or some kind of some kind of meeting of sorts that's kind of like that within the ring, within the dome, because they're starting to rent out the dome to do other side things, and we end up finding out that a lot in this one episode. That all of a sudden they're using the dome as a jewelry selling thing. They're starting to use the dome for doing certain kind of meetings for stuff. And it's like, okay, so they're trying to figure out how to make money still in the dome by putting this together to try to rent out the space, so that way they can go and make some side money, because that's, I guess, their plan, to try to make it into the state fair, which it seems like they're having some difficulties doing. And so I like the thing going on with Apocalypse. That whole line delivery that Apocalypse was doing for that whole speech was freaking amazing. And also we have some things going on with Rooster, which I was really fascinated about, and I was like, oh my god, no! Rooster, no! Eventually we just see Rooster eventually hanging out with Charlie Gully and talking about, hey, come to my promotion. And I'm like, no! No! I don't want to see that. No, no, no. Come on! Keep Rooster with all the other guys. And, it seems like we had that moment of camaraderie where I was thinking maybe that Rooster isn't gonna go and leave, but then the more that Rooster is to talk with Jack Spade's character, eventually he's just seeing the more things seem to change, the more they stay the same. So Rooster eventually is to make a decision on what he's really to do, and everything other than that is just kind of, it's just let's have another event so we can kind of honestly eat up time. But hey, not every single episode is going to be the greatest, biggest, whatever thing. And we can just kind of tell in this episode it's just all about people apologizing. I think interesting things like a Wild Bill and Willie talking together in this episode was kind of an interesting thing to get some backstory for those characters that I think has been just desperately been really needing to see Wild Bill beyond just this persona that he's been putting off. It's just so he has had something that's been eating at him for a number of years, and then he's finally getting that kind of closure moment or whichever with Willie, which I thought was really interesting. We also have Mick Foley in this episode. Yeah, freaking Mick Foley. That was great. Evidently Mick Foley is to play a podcaster, which I thought was really interesting. People may not know, actually, Mick Foley does have a YouTube channel. If you go and you search out Mick Foley, go ahead and find Mick Foley's YouTube channel. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Freaking it would be interesting to see uh, like if Mick Foley maybe talks about being on the show or whichever. I don't know. But go ahead and check out Mick Foley's YouTube channel. Yeah, really. I thought that was really cool. I'm like, yeah, freaking Mick Foley. This is great. I was maybe hoping that he would have like his daughter on also, considering like his daughter at one point in time was to have been a girl that was to be a wrestler. Like at some point, she was going through wrestling school and whatever. Like I saw the whole like I saw like Foley when I had like WWE Network. Like I know he had this like reality show, and I freaking watched it, and like it was really cool. Like I saw that Mick Foley had like in his house, like he loves Christmas, like so much so that he has like a whole room that's just like a Christmas room, which I thought was like really cool. I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. But yeah, his daughter, like Noelle Foley, like I wonder what ended up like happening with that. Whether she was to pursue wrestling or whichever, because like I don't know what ended up happening. Um, but anyways, it would be cool to kind of like if like Noelle is at like some part of a show, just like not just like maybe just background if that's what it is, but that'd be kind of cool. Um, but it was really interesting to see like Mick in this episode. It's like yeah, like cool. Like it seems that they're like getting guys that of course have like legitimately been in the ring with both CM Punk and both Mick Foley, and so it's kind of interesting eventually when they're to drop other characters either through matches or whichever to consistently get like some characters that of course like we've seen wrestle. So it's really interesting. So uh, I think that's about a bulk of what I think I wanted to say cryptically. Because really, there's not much here. There's not much for this episode, in all honesty. Uh, but luckily there isn't because it makes for an easy review. Also, it like I have to like figure out everything that's going on and figure out how to review it and compress it and whatever. But honestly, in this episode, uh, like in the downside of it, I can't praise the show every time. I can't praise the show all the time. The only thing that I feel like this episode at some points is to give us is something that we've already had at some point in the show already. Where it feels like there's some arguments that are to be had, and like they honestly say it's like, well, it's the same argument, but like done in a different way, done in a different kind of thing. So like I'm like, okay, so we're like doing this a second time around, but this time it's to really just like re-cement that it's like, hey, like Jack, you still need to be doing this, and or hey, like you should finally just uh like finally say like what you've probably been avoiding saying for I don't know how long. And it's a lot of that in this episode for anybody, not just Jack Spade. Just like it kind of feels like same old, or it's just kind of like finally saying what you were supposed to say. That's what kind of this episode really is. So with that said, let's go into this. Let's go and just review this episode. Um, like it's just like to where I would like consistently praise this show. Like this is like of course like the kind of the downtime of episodes, because of course we had the big match and the hoopla and the now like in this episode it just like I would be interesting. It just I would just be saying like, man, this is great, blah blah. Blah. But like this time, I'm just like, yeah, it's just kind of like the writing and the story and the just apologizing and just because really we just reintroduce Big Jim Kitchen in this episode also, and what they end up doing, I'm like, okay, I just don't find this exciting. Like I just don't. But that's like, hey, they had to figure out some way to reincorporate this character, and so that was the thing. So yeah. the bet like probably besides the Apocalypse and Rooster in this episode, I thought the Tom Spade stuff was interesting. Like it's still getting little snippets about this character and eventually what is to have probably led up to his death, let's say. That eventually he is to have gotten way over his head. And there's some real snippets and real parts where we get to see like both the down and out Tom Spade, but we also get to see also the time where Tom had some faith in his son or sons. Were well mostly just Ace because like he talks about Ace at some point in this video, but like it's kind of remembering like the good times, kind of remembering when it was just like them sitting around having fun, and like that's the interesting thing. Like Tom had that time, but Jack doesn't, and that's becoming the main problem with his wife Stacy's relationship is just Jack just does not have time. He can't come up with the time, and because there is a lot of things at stake, there's a lot of things to do, and so we really come to the pass of here to where it's just like, dude, Jack, you need to just divvy up your responsibilities. Ace needs to do something. Give him something. We gotta start prying Jack away from bits and pieces of this wrestling thing. Or otherwise, like, something is gonna happen between Jack and Stacy, and I don't want it to. Like, keep this relationship solid. We gotta figure something out. Jack has to eventually give up something. And I hope by the end of this season, he does that. I hope that happens. So let's get into it. Let's go into that double five. It's about that time to go into this thing called spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this episode. So roundabout way of reviewing this, because there's just a lot of just stuff in this episode, and not all of it is easily connected to everything. So let's get into like the Tom Spade stuff. Like I found that to be really interesting, and so we'll get into that. So there's to be this one snippet in the early part of the episode where we have Tom Spade who is going, and like evidently he had put on a like a really great show, and Willie is talking about it like, hey, yeah, you put a really good show out, you put something really good out. But Tom was just like, well, yeah, but the scoreboard at the end says that I lost. Like the scoreboard at the end of all this just says that I'm just not doing well. And that's all that really mattered to Tom, was no matter how good of a show that he was putting on, he wasn't reaching enough people. Like there was no way to get more people. And so all of a sudden, like Jack was spending more money than he probably should have. But like there was no way probably during his time period to reach a bigger massive audience. There wasn't probably like internets and all kinds of things to have Jack or to have Tom expand to figure out how to reach a new audience. And so that's why Tom's company might have failed. The DWL may have failed to eventually just leave it to have Jack figure things out. Which eventually they get to that when they're at that baseball field, and both Willie and Jack are talking it out about how Tom would have done things, and Jack is like, well, like, Tom messed up, and Tom left this to me to just deal with, and Jack is having to clean up, sadly, his father's mistakes, and have to try to uh, not try to copy and paste and do step by step of what his father had done, and try to do something different, try to uh, get his DWL to a wider audience, which his father never did. And so from what I've heard, from what I hear from the show, because who knows. So eventually they'll expand upon that, and maybe there'll be some flashbacks, or maybe Wild Bill or something like that will tell us that, like, Tom used to do this kind of stuff all the time, or whichever. But anyways, so uh, so Jack is to eventually, after like seeing the stadium and figuring out how he's going to book this whole gig, Jack is to supposedly go on to do this podcast, and so he ends up doing this podcast with Mick Foley, which he doesn't say his name is Mick Foley. He ends up going by another name, but it's obviously Mick Foley. Like, I'm not just gonna go by some other actor's name, whatever. Like, it was funny that also, like, while Bill was to mention that evidently he had wrestled with Mick's character, and that supposedly like, Mick Foley's character had broken Wild Bill's wrists. And I thought that was kind of funny, because Wild Bill is trying to talk to Jack before he heads to this podcast, and evidently Wild Bill had made a joke with that guy. I think his name was Dick, and so, like, he ends up talking to him and kind of reminiscing about old times. So Jack eventually goes to this podcast, and all of a sudden, like, the podcast is all of a sudden to have Jack have nothing to really say, because Jack hasn't really booked the show way ahead of time, like seemingly months in advance, to just say, oh, well, hey guys, we're going to have this big star coming up that's so-and-so person, because really they have no titles on anybody but Jack himself, so there isn't any other person to promote in this promotion besides Jack, because he's the only guy holding the title. He's the only, like, if they had mid-card titles, if they had tag team titles, if they had a women's title, they had a billion other freaking titles, the 24/7/11 Slurpee Challenge Channel freaking title, like, then Jack would just be like, hey, I have this champion here, I have this champion in here, and hey, like, opening up the show will be this champion, but he doesn't have that. So, and Jack doesn't even know what he's going to do at the state fair. Like, there's already state fair people calling him saying, like, yeah, like, we should figure out some kind of strategy of how we can book tickets, because it doesn't seem like people are interested. And we're getting a little scared here, Jack. Like, hey, how are we going to be able to promote all this? How are we, like, who are we going to, like, slap on to just say, like, hey, come and watch this guy because he's good, and then he might lose for whatever thing. So the only thing that they supposedly have riding is on the Jack, Ace, and Wild Bill match, which that doesn't seem to really be a guaranteed thing, because Jack is talking to Willie, and Willie's like, I don't think we should trust him. I don't think we should trust Wild Bill. And Jack is like, well, I don't think we should trust him either. Like, it seems that eventually Jack is to tell Wild Bill that he needs to smooth things over with Willie, and so Wild Bill eventually goes and does that, where it seems that Wild Bill is interested in working with the DWL and really wants to, like, do something interesting that he can kind of build things on, and he's already like thinking of strategies and stuff like that to do, which I'm like, man, like why don't you just take Wild Bill and just like have him be like the promoter guy, like have him just be like the guy. It's like, hey, like you give him some ideas of what you're gonna do on the tour, and just have freaking Wild Bill go ahead and do that. Like, yeah, it might be a worried thing to eventually have Wild Bill do that guy, because he might just, just wear a wrestling belt and nothing else, and hey, try to get some promotion out of that. But anyways, uh, so uh, so Jack is talking to Mick, and so Mick eventually is to talk about some other things, to talk about that maybe Jack might have like Tom's like anger, or might have like and like Foley just starts talking about some like family stuff, like starts talking about Tom, and starts talking about like, well, hey, like if I can't figure out how my like viewers will be invested in your show because there's nothing to promote, then I need to figure out how they can be invested in you, the person I'm talking to. And so like it just gets to the point where Jack just walks off. Like there's nothing for him to really say. He doesn't want to talk about the stuff of his past. He doesn't want to talk about his dad, and he doesn't want to talk about like what he can like book for the show. So he has nothing. He just realizes that once he eventually starts talking to this guy, who is Mick Foley, and there's nothing to talk about. So he walks off. I'm like, God, like this is like, it's interesting because Jack was to really rest on the fact that he can use this guy to help promote this thing. And then the one bullet he had in the chamber is now just like, well, take that bullet out, because like you just really just rubbed that guy the wrong way by just not having any kind of content for him to talk about. So yeah, like that just ruined that whole setup of just like really Jack just relying on this whole podcast thing, and then it blew up in his face. So Jack is to try to make it to Big Jim Kitchen's baptism of his newborn child. So he tries to make it there. He ends up finding out that there's traffic. His wife is going and singing a song there, and so in the beginning of the episode, like Stacy is to say like, hey, like hear this song of mine, and Jack is like, I would love to, but I'm slammed, I'm busy, like it's just like there's so much going on, to where Jack is running off. And so by the time that Jack is to make it to that whole thing, to that baptism, he makes it way too late, because like there was traffic right as the road of where he was to go to get there, and so yeah, he misses the whole thing. But we did have a really good speech by Ace delivered into this whole thing, where like Ace is talking about that, like something about how that this kid has inherited some bad things, and that the baptism will eventually wash that all away. And like there was some kind of interesting parts of this speech that I'm not going to heavily get into, just because I didn't get into the apocalypse speech. I didn't get into that. Speaking of which, let's get into that. Because we'll put a pin in it, and we'll go into all the aftermath, like apologizing and all the stuff that everyone has to apologize for this episode. We'll get into that. So we end up finding out that that Apocalypse, who evidently is to be named after Apocalypse Now, which I thought was interesting, mentioning all about his family and that I think his father, I think, was involved in the Vietnam War. Evidently, his father was like 58 years old when Apocalypse was to be Apocalypse, so that was interesting. Uh, and just we get like a backstory of this character, so I'm kind of like, okay, it seems like we got some pretty interesting things going on here. Like Apocalypse doing this whole speech at this meeting. I don't know what it's for. Like they didn't specify if it was Alcoholics Anonymous or any number of things. It could have like it seems like that, and plus also they do the whole chip thing, like that someone has been at that meeting for a year. So I'm like, okay, interesting. Uh, so and Willie is just kind of watching on as Apocalypse is doing this whole thing, which I'm like, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? Uh, and it also seems like Willie is to be like she's mixing some alcohol there. What does that mean? Like, is all of a sudden we're gonna find out that like the Willie's drinking? Are we gonna find out something about that? Like maybe I don't know. Like, uh, that would be interesting to see. Like dive in more into Willie's character to see where that goes. But if there's so much going on. There's so much going on. Now with the Rooster stuff, let's talk about that. That is so interesting. So Rooster is to go and talk with Charlie Gully. I believe his name is Charlie Gully. He's been a while on the show. It's been a while since I've seen Charlie for a while, or any other promotion of his promotion on the show. So it's been a while. So Rooster all of a sudden is to come to Charlie, and so Charlie is to mention like, "Hey man, like I gotta go. I gotta leave here in like an hour. I got other things to do." By the time that Rooster comes to this diner, and so Charlie is just cementing that's like, "Hey man, like come with me and we'll treat you good." It's like, uh, you are a star and you're not being treated like one in your other promotion. You come to my place, we'll treat you like a star. Like you have a really great potential that no one is seeing. So come to my company and we'll treat you different. And weirdly, we have Charlie who ends up tossing $1,000 in front of Rooster, which like I don't know what that meant. Like, was that to be the woman's tip that that should have been the tip of the woman? Like that would have been a funny thing to eventually just have Charlie just be like, whoa, 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 because eventually Rooster takes the money and chucks it back at Charlie and just be like, I don't know, like what you're running when you're just throwing like $1,000 at me, thinking that like that'll be good enough to just sign me or whatever, but like you can take this $1,000. I don't give a crap. Like I thought that would have been cool if Charlie would have said, "Well, dude, that wasn't for you. That was for the waitress." Like freaking I tip big cuz people work hard. Like that would have been interesting if it wasn't for Rooster at all. Just be like, "Hey man, you didn't sign anything. Like you did like no. Like that was for the waitress. Like no, I tip big." Like and he could have just said like, "Hey man, like if you think I tip big for that waitress, like just imagine how well you're going to get paid." Like that would have been like the one interesting like mind thing of just like, "Hey, he freaking gave $1,000 to this waitress. Like just imagine how much I'm going to get when I freaking work for him." Wow, that sounds like a deal right there. So Rooster, after this moment, after like Charlie just has a guy that collects his $1,000 from off the side of the road, and then drives off. So Rooster is having these little moments with Jack Spade in between him going and doing his podcast with Jack going with Mick Foley, or uh, or we have Rooster eventually going to that whole get together and talking again to Jack. And so every time Rooster is to talk to Jack here, it kind of feels like Jack is not really like it seemed that Jack was open to talk to Rooster before, But then all of a sudden now it's just like Jack has no time for Rooster. Jack all of a sudden is just like, you know what? Like, I know that you're telling me that you really want like a main event spot, but you know what? Like, I just, and then Rooster is like, okay, so it seems that whenever I'm to talk to you, it seems like we're getting nowhere. Like I'm getting nowhere. So by the end of the episode, we have Rooster who ends up deciding to jump to the other promotion and drives off to get to that other promotion. I'm like, oh my god, no! Like, this sucks that we have, like, a character that, like, we want to see him succeed, but succeed where he is. But, like, this was bound to happen. Like, I kind of predicted this, where I thought Rooster was eventually going to go to another wrestling promotion. And I was like, God, this sucks. Because then Jack is also going to be one spot short of just like, well, I don't have any mid card talent. I don't have a mid card to put together. And plus, it also doesn't help that Bobby is to have his leg in a cast. And so Bobby's going to be out for a while. Bobby's going to be out for a while. So, yeah, like, so there's two guys down now. What are they going to do? How are they going to get past this? Is Wild Bill going to have to carry this show? Like, how are they going to be able to book anything when they have nobody? Just wait till somebody else gets injured, and then they're going to have no one. They're not going to be able to book shows. They're going to have to, like, call some people up. They're going to have to, hey, is Ricky Rabies busy? Is Ricky Rabies busy? Can we get another Ricky Rabies in here? Can we get another episode of that? Because we got nothing. Like, we got nothing. Unless they're going to call up some actual guys that are actually wrestling. Uh, that didn't mean Ricky Rabies isn't. He's wrestling. He's AEW. Freaking Darby Allin match. Freaking was great. That was freaking awesome. Very hard hitting and just like Darby Allin is so freaking fast. It's freaking insane how quick he is. But anyways, uh, going on. So now let's get into the whole apologizing thing because I think that's the big part of the episode. So, speaking of the whole get together thing, so Big Jim Kitchen is to have this whole baptizing thing. So Jim Kitchen is to call Ace at the very last like minute and say, "Hey, yeah, you're gonna have to say a speech. Yeah, I completely forgot about it because I haven't been on this show in X amount of episodes. So yeah, you're gonna have to do a speech." And Ace is like, "Oh, crap." Here's the thing, though. Ace promos, Jack? No. Let Ace just kind of be Ace. Have him just figure things out on his own. He'll do really well. If this can prove right here that he can wing stuff and do really well, why not have Jack just not have Ace like pre-write his promos for him? Just let him just do it. He'll be great at it. And like this spot obviously tells us that Ace will be good at winging stuff, because he had to come up with a speech like really quickly, and like it feels like he probably wrote something down like fairly, but he just wung it. He just tried it, and everybody seemed to enjoy it. And so all of a sudden afterwards, they have this whole get together. And I think I'm gonna save the Willie and the Wild Bill stuff for last. I'll save that for last, and I'll talk about like quickly about the Jack and the Stacy stuff because that's kind of like same old kind of thing. But it's just kind of reiterated. But I don't think it's really going to go anywhere. But we'll see. So So eventually we have people who are starting to realize, like, yeah, maybe I should start apologizing to people. So, so we have eventually Big Jim Kitchen who tells Ace, it's like, hey man, you should probably apologize to Bobby about what you did. Like, and Ace is like, hey man, it's just part of the show. It's like, no, like you need to apologize. Like you should really just say that you're sorry. Maybe when Bobby gets back to the ring, he's gonna give you a big fat receipt for just bah, this freaking hit you for but whatever. Like Bobby doesn't. It doesn't seem like Bobby is that kind of person that's like, oh, I'm gonna get revenge. Because he doesn't look like a guy that's holding a grudge. He looks like a guy that's just like fine sitting in his Winnebago, his RV, and it seems like things are fine. But I don't know. Like I want to see like an episode of like what Bobby's like what he's thinking. What's going on in his brain? Is he thinking like, "Oh my god, how am I going to be able to keep this going? Like how am I going to be able to be out for X amount of time and bills aren't coming in and like I got to eat. I got to drink something. And how is this going to happen?" I don't know. Uh, we'll see how that all plays out because Crystal is also like effed. Also, Crystal is trying to ask like Willie like what she thinks that is going to happen for her character, and Willie's just like, dude, you were the one who like caused Bobby to get injured. Like you basically went off script and you ticked people off, and then you lit the match to have Bobby get injured. So that's on you. And eventually Crystal goes to Bobby and she's like, well, did I really do that? Did I really do all that? And Bobby's like, no, hey, like, that's not your fault. Like, if anything, like stuff just happens. Like, people get injured and whatever. To just try to, like, just take the blame. Like, Bobby's, like, taking the blame from Crystal's like, no, like, it's fine. Like, don't blame yourself for all that. So eventually Ace is to see Bobby, and like Bobby's struggling to eventually get some chicken, get some freaking corn, get all kinds of food, whichever. Maybe this is like where catering was, and they were just like, hey, like let's just use catering and just let's just use catering as a backdrop for like a get together or whatever, because it looks like this might be food that maybe is in catering. I don't know. Like I'm sure a lot of these guys are like pro athletes and whatever. I'm sure they might not exactly be eating all kinds of this food, but who knows? I don't know what catering is always like in shows and whatever, because I'm sure a lot of people are trying to like be as slim as possible. Like they're basically eating like the most like vegetarian diet they probably can because they have to be shirtless every week. So, but who knows? So Ace goes to Bobby and helps him out, try to like get some food. And so it seems that Bobby really likes ranch. Just pour it on all over his food. And so eventually Ace is to apologize to Bobby. Bobby's like, hey, it's fine. It's fine. But I'm just waiting for the one day that Bobby just explodes and is like, it's not fine. I've just been so nice for too long. Ah! And then he just explodes. I'm waiting for that episode because Bobby is too freaking nice, so he needs to just erupt. He needs to do something. Like, he needs to all of a sudden just have, like, things go horribly wrong for him, and then he just freaking explodes. Because I'm waiting for that to happen. So, and I'm also just kind of hoping that they end up incorporating Bobby or Crystal somehow in what's going on, like some way or another, so that way they have something to do, meaning wrestling. Or otherwise, Crystal is just back going and and working at her gas station, I'm assuming, is what she was doing. So, uh, so yeah, I think that's the big like apologizing thing for like Ace and whatever. Like, uh, it also seems that Ace doesn't have like. Does he still have his woman at his side? Doesn't really seem like that. But I could be wrong. Like, I think she was probably at the baptism, right? Yeah, I think so, right? Anyways, so, but I don't see her anywhere else. So, but anyways, so yeah, Jack comes late to the baptism, and so the real, like, so Jack goes home and does not have a minute to go and play around with his wife and son catching fireflies or whatever. Like, Jack is just like away just at his phone, I guess, trying to book the shows for whatever and trying to figure out how to like come up with sponsorship or whatever for his shows. He's trying to come up with something. And so Stacy is to eventually just talk to Jack and just be like, you know what? Like, I need to know that, like, when I talk to you, I'm being heard. So we need to have this talk again. Because evidently you didn't listen to me the first time. And Jack is just like, well, you being heard is us going to, like, Mount Everest or something, or going to some vacation somewhere. And Stacy is just like, no, like, I need to know. Because like Stacy is mentioning that she doesn't feel like flourished or fulfilled or whatever in what she's doing, and she says that she ended up going to college to just be a woman who is to be working at a grocery store, and like that's not where she, I guess, saw her life going. I'm like, but man, she does really good at that music thing. She does really good at music. Like, what if like could we have Stacy like do like somebody's entrance music or something? Like, could we have her like use her music to do something for the DWL? That would be interesting to just like have her do songs for the entrance music. That would be cool. Just to have like one little thing for her for every time someone comes out. Like Stacey could be like, "Yeah, that's me. That's me. That's me doing that song." Like, wouldn't that be cool? Especially when the ladies maybe wrestle. Maybe Stacy can do the music for them. Like, it's a little thing, but it would make that character be happy or fulfilled or be like happy with what she's doing. Like, that would be something cool. I would love that for Stacy because she's been showcasing doing music anyways, so it would be cool if they added that somehow. They used that somehow. Because eventually, like, Bobby was doing his own like music, his own entrance music, so why can't Stacy do something? That would be cool. So, but yeah, so Stacy's arguing with Jack and talking about like, hey, like Jack is mentioning that he's burning candles at both ends, and Stacy's like, well, yeah, like we get how hard you work, we get that, we appreciate that, and whatever, but we also want you to have time for us. That when you will have time for us, it's not burnt out Jack that just can't do anything because like he's so exhausted from all the things that he does, all the candle burning at both ends things, that he has zero time to really just relax and enjoy his family time. And so like that whole argument, I'm finishing that up. I'm cleaning that up. So we are to also have Ace, who his mother is giving up all of Thomas's things to donate all of them, and so eventually, like Ace is to try to keep some of his dad's stuff, and then the thing that we end on this episode is to eventually see Ace kind of thumbing through old footage of Tom talking about how Ace had such a huge like thing of potential, how basically just watching Ace play with his friends with football, uh, really just Tom was just saying like, yeah, my son, he's gonna be in the NFL and like he's gonna be this great massive star and everything like that. And so like I don't know where that's going into the mind of that whole video, what's going on with Ace, where like that whole thing of Tom saying how much massive potential his son had to eventually have Ace just look at this video and just be like, yeah, and I didn't do any of that. like I I just like I'm here. Like I'm just stuck here at the DWL, not going into any professional legitimate anything. I wonder what that's going to do to Ace's psyche or whatever by the end of this by the next episode. We also had Ace, who was to mention about or was to kind of just apologize to Crystal and to also just kind of like say like, hey, like I'm sorry about all the stuff that kind of happened and that they didn't really like end their relationship on a good note. They just like one person went one way and one person went the other, and they didn't have this like closure moment that now they get to have, uh, which was nice. I liked that. And so now I think that I've covered everything. Let's cover the Willie and Billy Bob stuff, or Wild Bill stuff. Wild Bill. I hope I've said that right. So now, Wild Bill is to figure out a way to talk to Willie, because Willie is technically have numerous times tried to avoid Wild Bill. Send messages, send texts, while Bill has to try to talk to Willie. And so Willie's dodging him. And so Wild Bill is to just be like, hey, what I said wasn't right. And Willie's just like, what are you saying? Like what are you really saying here? Like it seems like all you're saying is like what you said wasn't right. Like you're just talking about the past. Like what are you going to do now? Like what are you going to like what are you really going to say now? And so eventually Wild Bill finally says, after kind of running around and chasing after Willie to talk to her, eventually he's like, well, hey, like I'm gonna just spit this out that like what you did to me in the past, because evidently Willie had changed from being Wild Bill's valet to Tom's valet, and because Willie thought that Tom was going to make it into the big leagues and Wild Bill wasn't, and so because Willie was to mention how nice and how nice Wild Bill was to her before, and now all of that is gone. It's like, well, Wild Bill is to mention like, well, the whole reason for that is because uh, is because Willie gave up on Wild Bill, that she decided to go with Tom, which really just like ate at Wild Bill to push him to then go to the pros and have Tom just sit his way here with this company. And then while Willie had realized that that was a mistake, that Willie was also to think that while Bill just consistently having just an oasis with Willie just wasn't that good. That just wasn't like they just went their separate ways, and like things ate at them for way too long, and just of course like both of them are just like, well, hey, like this just didn't really work out because eventually like things just ate at people, and that's what caused them to break up, to eventually have Willie go the way she did. But it seems like they are to mention that Willie's daughter is probably not from her current husband. I think that Willie's daughter is actually from Wild Bill, and we haven't confirmed that. We haven't gone into that. And I think there probably will be an episode where they'll finally just say that Wild Bill is actually Willie's daughter. Because it doesn't feel like they've confirmed that, but it seems like they keep going back to that. So I'm wondering if they're finally going to say that at some point to confirm that, because it doesn't seem like they have. But it seems like they're getting around that for whatever reason. They keep bringing up, between Wild Bill and Willie, they keep bringing up Willie's daughter. So there's something about that that's not quite said that I hope will eventually be said at some point. Because I think Willie's daughter is Wild Bill's daughter, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, so we get some interesting things here. We get some closure moments between both Willie and Wild Bill. That's the most interesting thing about this episode. As if I haven't said that everything is interesting, because that's bound to happen. But I like these closure moments. I like the fact that we get certain characters. I'm like, ooh, I wanted to see Apocalypse. Give me a story about that. Now I think it's probably we need Diego. We need either Diego's backstory, because that's a person we haven't really talked about much. And so that'll be interesting to see, like, about that character, spend some time with him. And I want some more Wild Bill stuff. We got to really dissect this character a little bit more. Because I want to see where, like, all that anger that he had in that one episode, I want to see where all that came from. Like, I want to see if we get some flashback stuff, more with Tom or something like that, just some kind of more flashbacks of Wild Bill's career, which I think would be kind of interesting to see, like, where it has really brought him to that point of being so angry, because he ended up talking about that in this episode. So it'll be cool to see some, like, history of this character, to see where all of that has built up to be, of that anger, of all that stuff that he's been carrying for so long. I want to see more about that. That'll be interesting. Plus, it'll also be interesting to see how they're going to promote this state fair, and if it's going to blow up in their face or not. I want to see that happen. So with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Hopefully everything was covered, but it's bound to slip my mind about something, because there's a lot of stuff going on in this episode, even though it was a slowed down kind of episode still. Big Jim Kitchen had a couple of cast members holding the baby. Like, Crystal held it, then Ace held it. I don't know what that means. Like, I'm searching for meaning in every little snidbit of whatever going on in this show, where maybe we're to possibly see that Ace is to grow up in this episode. I don't know. Like, I'm searching for something that I don't think maybe is there. And maybe, like, when you have a person, like, getting a baby in their arms, you're thinking, like, oh, so, like, are they thinking about what their future might lead, that they might want a baby in the future, searching for things, searching for meaning, like hidden meanings in what's going on in the future of this show. I don't know, but it seems interesting enough. But everything seems interesting, and I probably have like, hey, it seems like, yeah, this show was, but then eventually once I talk about it more, it's like, yeah, this was cool, this was awesome, I liked that, it's still like a positive thing, but like the episode just kind of seemed just kind of like not as great and as woo, yeah, like as before, but there's still good things about it. And that's the thing that I think we need to end on, is there's still good things about the show. There's always to be a down episode, and this was one of them. So I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.